I'd like to ask Andrew about the Schumann resonance and its relationship to us, or how it affects our technology. So I understand that the Schumann resonance has north and south, so it's got the polarities that it moves and exchanges energies between. We have a vagus nerve that has north and south the same, which is our superhighway where our I am presences come in. So when the Schumann resonance is spiking, is that an opportunity for more of our I am presence to come through the vagus nerve? Is there some alignment in that?
It depends on the type of spike in the Schumann resonance. In the example above there, you see a broad spectrum spike. All that is X particles coming in from the solar wind. And something else you must understand about this Schumann resonance reader thing, there are only 4 antennae in the whole world that read the Schumann resonance. 4. Just 4. So there's only 4 locations that they're giving you the resonance factor. Every place that's separated by more than 3, 5, 7 miles will have its own Schumann resonance reading. It'll be slightly variance to the place before, based off of the type of magnetic rock that's underneath it or not. So every individual place has its own individual. So when you're looking at the Schumann resonance, you have to know what it is that you're looking at. Amplitude versus modulitude versus frequency versus harmony, and the vibration that it's creating. When you see these oversaturated graphs, that's not necessarily something with lots of amplitude. It's just a large signal coming in. That doesn't mean it's affecting you. You have to know on those 4 bars, what is it sensing there? You can guess that it's going to be planet-wide at that level. What effects will that have? Each and every individual person will have a change in their magnetic frequency based off of the Schumann resonance changes in their local environment, but only if there are big and humongous spikes. The whole point of the Schumann resonance is to give consciousness a grounding in physical bodies here, as what allows us to have multidimensional frequencies, understandings, sights, visions, and experiences in dream worlds. That's also what helps us create the different density layers that are layered on top of each other of the multiverse that's our perception. So how does it interact with the body? Well, the vagus nerve is the broadcast and reception antenna and the grounding rod. Like houses have to have a grounding rod, so when they get hit by electricity, the vagus nerve also acts as a grounding rod for consciousness to incarnate over and over again with the great forgetting intact. So it's a fundamental part of our energetic makeup. Schumann resonance also influences our uncollective consciousness. We are putting out energies. Joel had an image earlier of the different weather patterns and the cold patterns coming down from the north. If you could bring those up, Joel. See all these different eddies, movies, lines, and there's the cold weather coming in out of the north. Think of where all the consciousness in California and San Francisco is. And then you can see all the individual eddies that are over those particular areas, pulling the energy of consciousness into the great cycle and system. Which same thing goes for the entire United States. Wherever you're seeing blue is being charged up by consciousness that was probably live in its local environment 12 days ago. So it takes about 18 days for the energy of consciousness to go up into the clouds and fade into the clouds, and people become part of the uncollective energy, which is continuously being influenced by the solar particles, radiations, aurora borealis effect that is going on, which then influences the surface energies of the Schumann resonance, not the deep subsurface or the near surface. The higher altitudes will have magnetic changes. That affects the astral worlds. So that is why when a lot of times there are solar flares, people end up being sleepless or having really weird dreams or find themselves in a state where they just can't fall asleep.
How does it affect the craniosacral pulse, Andrew, when these the Schumann resonance kind of
greatly.
spike?
Let's say we're talking at a full amplitude and modulitude spike. So every level of the meters, the energy levels are up, the wavelength is, everything is it's at max. What's going on there is your vagus nerve is both projecting its ability to stay grounded in this environment, but is receiving information to take it to other places. So it's a tug of war between the vagus nerve, the consciousness, and the astral worlds that are looking for a state of human perception.
So this energy, Andrew, is coming from the human technology. leaving the body and physically rising up into the atmosphere.
Yes. We are constantly giving energy off into the upper atmospheres. And it goes through different phases where it lets go of the original I am energy that created it, and it becomes intentional energy. And that intentional energy becomes part of our greater potentials that exist in our crown chakras, because we're constantly feeding it to the uncollective up there to create resolution through synchronistic actions. This is a way one can also chart synchronicities, understanding the magnetic and weather-based patterns. Many, many other worlds do that on a regular basis. Imagine having an astrological forecast of when synchronicities are going to come to harvest for you. And you have foreknowledge of it.
So you say there's only 4 kind of machines or whatever records the Schumann resonance from different areas in the world. So say if it was one reading on one side, it would be totally different the other side, obviously.
Correct. Yeah. So those 4 places are Saudi Arabia, England, United States, and Philippines, I believe, or Japan. I can't remember which was the third one or the fourth one. But yeah, there's only 4. You can look it up.
Whereabouts in England is it, Andrew?
I don't know.
Okay.
So a spike in one part of the world wouldn't necessarily mean there'd be a spike in another part of the world.
Right. That's why in so many of the shows I talk about stop overly focusing on the Schumann resonance. You're not getting sick when it goes up and down. All it's doing is affecting you. Can you sleep or not sleep? And if you're sleeping deeply, you're going to have dreamy energy. That's natural because there's more energy in the upper atmosphere and charging the ancestral realms to have more communication. It's a natural part of it. And if you prepare for solar flares, like you use spaceweather.com and you know it's coming, there are things that you can do energetically and ritually prepare for it and have a perfectly normal time with it. And or a wonderful, wonderful roller coaster of adventures.
Do we naturally tune into the background electromagnetic frequency without even thinking it's a Schumann resonance?
Yes.
We just do. It's a natural state of being.
Exactly. That's the natural living frequency. Because you can tap into the Schumann resonance to give you potent strength and power to change elements that are in your environment. That's the other thing the human body can do. You know, they talk about the pollution of this planet. The pollution of this planet can be cleaned up very fast by our conscious intentions. Once we have access to the higher frequencies, energies, and channel through our bodies, we could take the most poisoned environment and turn it back to pristine in minutes instead of years.
So does where this energy emanates from us and goes up and becomes the weather, let's say you have somewhere that is somewhere that has war or something like this, and that consciousness goes up.
Yes.
Is that energy then taken on by the water in the atmosphere? And when we have precipitation and raining, that energy is then put onto another area?
Yes. Yeah, and then that energy that water rises higher and higher into the atmosphere. It takes on charged energy from sunlight also, which programs it with a sunlight energy as well as the war frequencies, etc., etc. But yes, war is a way to taint the greater environment. That's why they have wars over specific energy points, because they know it'll absolutely affect the energetic weather patterns.
And can the Schumann resonance be weaponized?
Yes. If it were to be nullified, many of us would die within a few days. If we didn't have a Schumann resonance, our consciousness can't function without it.
Because I've heard you talk about on ships, they have a unity drive, you call it?
Yes.
And that replicates what the Schumann resonance does for us.
It represents the celestial consciousness.
Right.
So it's not just the Schumann resonance; it's all the other things that the celestial consciousness provides for an environment that has a micro and macro food chain of life.
Mm. So it's on so many different layers because when we think about the Schumann resonance in a light worker kind of way, we just see these rises and falls in energy, and we think that we're just here floating away on a whim and peaking and troughing as it sees fit. But actually there's a lot more to it, and it's almost like actually a dispersion of consciousness.
Yes, that's why I call it the uncollective consciousness. So this pattern that Joel has up here right now would be a representation of the uncollective trying to become a collective. Even though individual cities and environments are constantly influencing to become a collective, it still remains an uncollective. Because there are many other factors in human culture and in unknown history that aren't allowing it to come together.
And so how would this look if we were in unity consciousness?
Ooh, good question. That ring on the top right would be much smaller, more centered to the top, and those bands would be more S-shaped to go over the population centers. So there's an even flow pulling energy up off the population centers and depositing dense energies into the north and south poles so that the ancestors can resolve some of the dense energies for the surface beings. And then as the different Arctic weathers change, then more and more energies that the ancestors have resolved will come back in the programmed weather patterns, creating a continuous cycle of healing.
So would it be safe to say that it's also a form of communication between the different realms of Earth? So, for instance, like the astral realms, the ancestral realms, the Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis, surface population, and so forth.
So what's the question?
So is it almost like a communication as well? The way that the consciousness rises.
Think of it as Earth's Wi-Fi system for souls to connect. Yes. Global surface, subsurface, astral, inner Earth network that you can connect to. Yes. Because the Schumann resonance is also deep under Earth too. It's not just the surface of the Earth.
And for those listening, Andrew, what would be the first steps if someone hasn't listened or felt it? What would be the first steps for doing that? What would you recommend for those listening to connect to it?
First, you must extricate the words awakening, sickness, ascension syndromes, symptoms. As long as you're using those words and relating any of that to the Schumann resonance, you will have missed its important teachings. Like Laura said earlier, when you have Schumann resonance spikes, you have opportunities to do your best possible work. You have an excess amount of energy coming from all of your charged up realms to help you resolve something internally within yourself, to go on spiritual journeys, to have unique experiences. Because when it's not spiking, we don't have the daily energy because of the state of our culture and the dumbed downness of our society. We don't have the energy that it takes to actually travel 4, 5, 6 times a month, let alone one. The vast majority of average people out there, it takes 2, 3 months to build up energy to have one astral travel that might be in dream state like 2 minutes long. And then you're out of energy again.
You see it on Facebook when someone posts about the astrology or the Schumann resonance at a peak, and they start saying, we're in for shit now, we're in for loads of crap happening. But the Schumann resonance is giving that potential for us to do that work and see what's within us, really. And a lot of people have, like you said, bastardized it and got it in the wrong way of what it's truly about.
Okay, so why do crazy things happen during Schumann resonance spikes? Well, it's not really the Schumann resonance spikes as much as it's the X-class solar flares charging up all the realms, making all the realms hyperactive. And if you're one of those people that constantly smelling the mouse fart next door on your spiritual journeys, everything's gonna worry you. Everything's gonna be done. Everyone's gonna be activated around you.
So it's about really utilising it as a positive life force to make positive changes.
Or a grounding life force, yes.
So what about people who are unaware of Schumann resonance and so on? What sort of is it can just bring chaos into their lives because they're not?
Not always. Sometimes it brings great abundance. Sometimes it brings the best sleep they've had in their life, and that they were insomniacs the rest of their life. Everyone's going to react differently to it. Everyone has their own unique spiritual contracts when a remembering or an awakening begins, and nothing is there before other than the dog treats that have been set out by the precognitive workforce.
Right, so it's about your individual contract with the celestial mind.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Maddie.
Because what we're seeing mostly is the uncollective consciousness. during these times of peaks and troughs, do the uncollective consciousness limit what those of us who are on the awakened journey can do with these peaks and troughs, or is it really an individual language?
No, it does limit us. The uncollective energy is the tool for the system, how it creates predictive modeling against us. And the uncollective, it represents all the hopes and fears, all the good and the bad. And there are a lot of times the bad outweigh the good, and when you look at it as a balancing factor, but each individual city, each individual bubble and energy of an area is giving off that's giving off soups of negativity, create this uncollective that doesn't want to come together. Okay? An aspect of it doesn't want to come together, and that aspect is being shed off as more and more of the high energy realms are hypercharged and hypercharged and hypercharged.
So if the global narrative or the media keeps putting fear within weather, then that has a effect on the collective unconscious or collective conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which
the side of the uncollective consciousness that wants to come together and empowers the uncollective to not come together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So would you say things like Wi-Fi and signals were created, is that to disconnect us from that more natural Schumann resonance pulse?
More like a camouflage energy that makes it hard to distinct it between one and the other.
Okay.
Done on purpose, so you have to be able to refine your skill to get into the true Schumann resonance or get out of the electrical-based cities. I mean, how many people in the audience have lived in a city and you go outside of the city and it feels completely different? Okay? Or you get to the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of a high desert, and there's nothing within 100 miles of you. No civilization energy either.
Does the dreaming world have its own measurement of its own frequency measurement, and is that closer to the Schumann resonance?
So if we were to have a graph how the dreaming worlds are affected by the Schumann resonance, is that what you're asking? And what's the correlation? All right, so put it this way. Those things that you're reading there, those are censored data that miss data, and that's not a complete look. So this is like trying to compare apples to elephants. It does not compare. If you were to have a graph where consciousness was interacting with the Schumann resonance, that is a nature of how dream worlds work. Dream worlds ping the Schumann resonance to be slightly out of phase of physical time so they can be stacked and layered. The portal to get to that space is usually through the North Pole or South Pole, Aurora Borealis, or individual bubbles and spaces that have subsurface stone formations that create a unique dream world in that area.
That's why we want to dream with the North Pole, the Aurora Borealis, with our
Correct.
ancestors there. Yeah.
That's why I want to travel up there to have those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So because there's only 4 things which can record it, what about those who aren't in that position where it is being recorded? How would they be able to know specifically when the Schumann resonance is creating more of a pulse? What would they be able to do?
First thing first, stop trusting that graph.
Okay, that's what, it just feels...
That's the first thing you do. Is that graph is such... If there were 500 Schumann resonance antennas spread all over the planet, you could give that graph a tiny bit of merit. You would probably need 200,000 to 300,000 Schumann resonance detectors spread over the world to get something that could be considered trustworthy. Okay? That has become a fear tool, that graph. But it's also become an inspiration tool. Even though it may lead you into the wrong directions, it's still making you an explorer. Okay? Now we just got to give the explorers the right maps to work with. Okay? So if you're seeing a Schumann resonance spike, go to spaceweather.com and look, is it an X-class flare? Is it what's creating? Is it just the common solar wind? Then you know, okay, it's just more energy empowering the upper realms. With that, I have a strategy. I want to visit the upper realms that are highly empowered because it's easier to do. Okay? Or if you want to go and visit the lower Aurora Borealis, or Australis energy, that's the 7 future generations. That's the future beings waiting to come in.
So does the Schumann resonance broadcast on a solar system level?
So yes, there is a solar system Schumann resonance. Yes, so each individual planet has its own Schumann resonance. And then it affects the celestial system itself, yes.
So that would be like the heartbeat of the galaxy and the heartbeat of the
Correct.
universe. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But ultimately, all this is governed by the sun, isn't it? Even the Schumann resonance is governed by the
Sure.
CME.
But consciousness travels through the sun to get to the celestial source. So they're all sympathetic with each other. They're all related to each other. Without the sun, consciousness couldn't get here. Without the consciousness, couldn't grow. But without the celestial source, consciousness does nothing. It just sits inside the sun.
Yeah,
So could we imagine it?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, that's it.
So could we imagine it as, let's say, for example, in the Aurora Australis, when there's a solar event, they could be waiting there to receive whoever's coming in?
They're already there. And the energy from a solar flare, how it's affecting the Australis, is different. First, you must energetically separate the 7 past generations and the 7 future generations. They exist on different layers. So the South Pole Aurora Borealis is still equal to the North Pole Aurora Borealis at one level. It's ancestral, the past generations. The South represents where intense solar weather patterns will mean more life force is going to be born in the next month or so. But that also means life force is going to come out. It is not always a balancing process. There are times way more life force comes in than goes out. That's why they keep as many wars and conflicts going as possible, like the drug war, etc., because they want the death rate to be considerably high and the birth rate to be much lower. That's what that greatly affects the uncollective consciousness.
Oh, that makes sense.
Imagine if there was a great birth rate, a great growth rate, and a low death rate.
And that would be beneficial for those of
Yes.
us on the ascension timeline.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's what's coming for us. Great time of benefit.